So these guys, you guys, I'm prepared for them. So the first one, Jonathan Hughes, they're both on the same video as well. It's just a short and talking about replacing foam in surfboards as opposed to filling giant holes with resin and micro balloons. So Jonathan says, I love how he wears the respirator. Well, he needs a voice. I love how he wears the respirator when mixing chemicals, but never wears the respirator when sanding down the foam. Lol. Classic Jonathan. And then Purdue Farmer. Alright, I don't want to mess with these guys too bad. So they say, quick question, why did he attack that foam bulge with a sander instead of cutting it down with a razor first? Even with an aggressive abrasive, that must be time consuming as well as create a ton of unnecessary dust. And then Jonathan Hughes, no doubt, has liked this comment right here. So I have a sneaking suspicion these two are in cahoots with one another and they know each other. So what they're referring to is I've poured the foam in the hole in the board, the foam has expanded, the next day I come back and I've got kind of like the foam's about that tall above the board, so instead of taking a blade, which Purdue would like me to do, and cutting the top off and then just sanding a little bit, I just sand the whole bloody thing. So that's Purdue's issue. Jonathan's issue is that I don't wear a mask when I'm sanding down the foam. So I have some things here that I'd like us to look at. So I'm actually going to... it's been so long I can't remember. Oh yeah, here we go. Alright, so this is that coconut board that I did, the SUP, where we laminated it with a coconut from a real coconut tree, a New Zealand coconut tree. So we're just going to watch close up at my sander and the amount of dust and shit that is coming out of my sander. You'll notice that there's like nothing coming out. And the reason, there's a little bit just there, some little crumbs. But the reason for that is because my sander, as many of you will know, is hooked up to a vacuum. And so my sanding doesn't look like this sanding. So YouTube cooked my audio a little bit here, guys, but basically what I was saying was, look at the dust coming off of this guy's sander, and this guy is definitely wearing a mask, because as you can see, he is making one hell of a mess. He has no vacuum on his sander. And look at the state of his workshop. So the reason I insist on using an orbital sander and having a vacuum set up is so that I don't have to work in a hellhole like this one, and I don't have to wear that smelly mask all day. If you've ever watched any of my videos, you will notice that my workshop is comparatively pristine. I could just about eat off the floor of my workshop, and that's because I use an orbital and a vacuum. And then just to sink it in, let's have a look at this guy's as well, and look at the dust coming off of his sander. This is Timpone. So look at that dust. It's crazy. And now we're just gonna, just to drive the point home, we'll go back and look at my sander. So any minute, here we go. Now look at the no dust coming out of my sander, because this hose here goes into a vacuum cleaner. The only place you'll ever get dust, you'll notice, is where the pad isn't flat. So if I'm sanding like this ridge along here, there'll be a little bit of dust that doesn't get sucked up through the holes. But if my sander is flat on the surface, then there's nothing. And then just to drive the point home a little bit further, this is me yesterday working in my shed on a couple of surf skis. So I don't have the vacuum because I'm at home, and I'm using just an orbital sander, the same as I usually do, but not with a vacuum, obviously. And look at the dust cloud. Notice I'm wearing a mask. You see that? because look at the dust coming out of it. So the reason I don't wear a mask is because I've sunk a lot of money into a really good sander that extracts dust really well, and into a really good vacuum that extracts dust really well. And this is a really deliberate thing, because I don't want to wear that all day, every day. I'm doing on average 5 hours of sanding every day. My skin would just be a nightmare. My face would stink if I wore a mask every day, all day. It's hot, uncomfortable, and if I didn't have the vacuum, then I would constantly be sweeping and cleaning up as well. I could never keep finished boards clean. They'd be covered in dust. I couldn't eat in my workshop, nothing. So anyway, that's my answer to Jonathan about not wearing a mask. And Purdue Farmer here said the same thing with unnecessary dust, but that's not the case because of my vacuum. But why did he attack the foam bulge with a sander instead of cutting it down with a razor first? Even with an aggressive abrasive, that must be time consuming. So with 80 grit or 120, which is what I'm going to be sanding this foam lump down with, it's going to take 15 to 20 seconds to sand down to the board's level. Now if I was to go and get my Stanley knife, walk over to the board, flick the blade out, saw through that bulge of foam, throw the bulge of foam in the bin, put the blade away, walk back to where I keep the knife, put the knife away, walk back to the board, get the sander and sand it, it's probably going to take longer than 15 to 20 seconds. So I don't know if it's quicker, but it certainly doesn't take a long time in comparison to cutting it with a razor blade first. So those are my answers to those questions. I'm going to heart both of them.